We have multiple 49ers updates now that we are just days away from the first preseason game. We have notes from joint practice with the Tennessee Titans, injury updates on some 49ers stars, and news relating to the depth chart for the 49ers and what that might look like. We're going to break that all down for you on this episode of Niners Digest. My name is Ethan Galbraith. Thank you again, as always, for watching. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe. It's free to do so you don't miss any Niners updates, because we're going to give you everything we got, including what you need to know now that we're just 2 days away from the 49ers' first preseason game. The time is nearly here. 49ers football is almost back. To an extent. We're not quite to week 1 in Australia versus the Rams, but we're getting pretty close. Just in 2 days from now, the first 49ers preseason game kicks off versus the Tennessee Titans, and they've already started preparations with joint practices with the Titans. So I think that's the perfect way to start. Let's get into it right there. Nick Wagner put out kind of a brief note about what was going on today with joint practices between the Titans and the 49ers. He tweeted, quote, 49ers and Titans just wrapped joint practice. Lots of skirmishes early, but both teams settled in and got good work. Mike Evans was back from quad issue, but mostly just individual work. Strong days from QB Brock Purdy, wide receiver Demarcus Robinson, wide receiver Dejon Stribling, among others. So this is a lot of the same that we've been seeing. Dejon Stribling, I'll start there, has been having a great rookie training camp, and it looks like that is continuing into joint practices with the Tennessee Titans. This is his first time seeing a non-49ers opponent in his NFL career, even if it's just in practice. So that's a big deal that he's continuing to stand out. Brock Purdy and Demarcus Robinson, veterans of this offense, glad to see that they are working well. Purdy specifically, I'm glad to see that he is performing well still against other defenses now, because again, he still has a lot of injured players on his offense, so to see him still performing and players like Robinson stepping up and other players' absences is a big deal. And of course, Mike Evans being back from his quad issue to an extent is also a big update. And that is perfect for what we're talking about next, some injury updates relating to other 49er stars. The big one is obviously Christian McCaffrey. He missed yesterday's practice and today's practice with what the 49ers were calling tightness. Now, I don't believe this is a big issue. I'm not very concerned about it. This is part of managing McCaffrey's workload and his high usage that he saw in 2025. Of course, the 49ers want to lower that. This is part of that process so he can stay healthy for as long as possible, especially during training camp, the long days of training camp. Kyle Shanahan spoke to the media talking about this and asked about his concern. And among other things, he said, quote, "My concern would be him toughing through tightness like a lot of people do and then hurting something bad." So obviously, the Niners are being cautious about this. That makes perfect sense. For 49ers fans, considering how many other injuries the Niners have dealt with so far in this training camp, I'm not surprised that, and I don't blame anybody for being kind of feeling a certain way about this. I don't think this is something to be concerned about. Yes, it would be nice to see him get reps against the Titans defense during these joint practices, but if he's unable to, we already know what he's capable of. It's about keeping him healthy. And speaking of health, that has been obviously a big factor during this training camp, and that has definitely shaped what the depth chart might look like. And speaking of which, we got the first unofficial depth chart for the 49ers in 2026. Cam Inman posted this earlier today to Twitter, and there is a lot to unpack here. Of course, there are some things to note. There are some injuries factored in here, but there's others that are not. So we're going to talk about all of that. I want to start with the offense. So let's break this down a little bit. Here is the unofficial depth chart for the 49ers offense to start. This came out today, as I mentioned. So there's a lot to unpack here. Let's start with the one that stood out to me at first, which is the wide receivers. Of course, Mike Evans at wide receiver 1. There's no surprise there. But then you look at the other wide receiver slot. It's Demarcus Robinson and Deebo Samuel. Now, that is a big deal. Now, of course, you got to remember Ricky Pearsall is not healthy. He's going to miss the 2026 season. So there is a big wide receiver, arguably was going to be one of those starting 3 wide receivers, who's not going to play at all this year. So Deebo Samuel being in that spot isn't necessarily a huge surprise. I think that's part of why he was brought in here, to fill in that gap that Ricky Pearsall is leaving behind. Again, 2 different styles of play, but a productive wide receiver nonetheless. Demarcus Robinson, however, being in the other starting wide receiver spot was something I took note of. Now, I believe that Robinson is very much capable of being a great receiver. He showed flashes of it. Everyone remembers the wild card game versus the Philadelphia Eagles last year. So he's very capable of being a starting wide receiver. I just think with all of the change that the wide receiver room has gone through because of the injuries, I think it's cool to see that he's stepping up. Now, again, this is just the first unofficial depth chart. A lot could change. Of course, the player you want to always look out for that we have been talking about nonstop is Dejon Stribling. I think while he's not one of those 3 starting wide receivers yet, I expect him to get a lot of play time in this preseason, of course, but I don't think he'll have to wait long in the regular season to get reps either. So one final look again at the offense on the depth chart. Another thing that I noticed is Robert Jones is the starting left guard right now. Connor Colby was another player to look out for that starting left guard position, but for now it is Robert Jones. So wide receiver and left guard were the 2 biggest notes of mine. I mean, of course, you look at running back as well. Jordan James and Kalen Black are both in that running back 2 position. They're both dealing with injuries, so can't quite tell who's going to be running back 2 behind Christian McCaffrey just yet. But now let's go to the defense because there is a lot going on here. Again, one thing I want to note before I talk about anything else, Mykel Williams is not on this list because he is still on the PUP list. So he will not be factored into this depth chart. But one thing I did note is that Jaden Duggar, right there, maybe you can't see him at first. He's the 2nd string Sam linebacker. Now, Jaden Duggar has been a name that I've brought up in the past, and I believe that he really can be a hidden gem because of how much of a freak athlete he is, his experience at different positions on the defense. So to see him already as the 2nd string linebacker is a big deal. He's also another player that I believe can be an impactful player on the defense sooner rather than later. I don't think he's going to have to wait long to be an impactful player on this defense and get his opportunities to do so. But to see him already on the 2nd string of the defense is a good sign. I'm looking forward to seeing how much more he improves going through the rest of joint practices, the preseason, and as the regular season eventually gets here. Going back to the depth chart again, Nick Bosa is here obviously in his starting defensive end position, but he is dealing with injury. A lot of people haven't really seen him a whole lot recently. There's been some concerns. Kyle Shanahan did talk about Bosa's injury update to the media today as well. When talking about it, he said, quote, soreness, tendonitis, it's a pretty normal thing with ACLs. And then goes on to say, we got to be smart here week to week. So Bosa's week to week as of right now. Now, when you hear something like tendonitis, obviously you get a little nervous for a player. But if Shanahan isn't worried about it, I don't think it's necessary for us as fans to be worried about it. They obviously take this very seriously, especially with a player like Nick Bosa, who has gone through multiple ACL surgeries too, even just with the 49ers. So they're going to obviously take major precautions with this. They want him to be healthy as long as possible. Everybody knows what Nick Bosa is capable of on the defense when he's healthy, but he's got to be healthy. That's the key word. So Jaden Duggar and Nick Bosa, but mainly Jaden Duggar, of course. Those are my main takeaways from this defensive depth chart as well. No surprise, really, in the defensive backs. Renardo Green, Diamador Lenore, Upton Stout. Those are the expected defensive backs. Ephesians Prysock being 3rd was a little surprising. I think he still has room to go up the depth chart. Another player to look out for. And then at safety, Brown and Mustafa, no real surprise there. Looking forward to seeing how they continue to play well, if they can hold those positions in the secondary. And then I want to go just really quickly to special teams, because the one that stood out to me right here, again, there is the PUP list, Garendo, Kittle, and Mykel Williams. They're not factored into the depth chart right now, but Deebo Samuel on kickoff return. We talked about this previously, about the roles that Deebo Samuel could play on this team, not just on this offense, and return was a potential opportunity for him. So to see him in the depth chart right there isn't really a big surprise. We've seen flashes of it during his previous tenure with the 49ers. So I'm not at all surprised by it. I'm looking forward to seeing how he contributes on special teams. I think he can be a real impact player. Think about the Niners special teams last year with Sky Moore. Sky Moore flipped multiple games for the 49ers because of his return capabilities. I'm not saying Deebo Samuel is going to be that for sure, and I don't necessarily think it's fair to expect that of him. They're 2 different players, but we've seen flashes of it. I think he has the potential to be one of those types of players. So to get the depth chart, the unofficial depth chart, is a great sign. Looking forward to more 49ers football that's coming soon. But of course, no need to get super excited yet. Cam Inman then talked about what the potential role is for the starters for the first preseason game. He tweets, quote, 49ers, quote, won't be playing many starters, end quote, in Thursday's preseason opener versus Titans, Kyle Shanahan said. He won't announce plan until he first shares with players. So this is where my final thought is. There's more news coming and for the first preseason game, but for now, I think it's a good thing to look forward to. The depth chart is here, a lot to take away from it, but I think right now, nothing's proven yet. I think this is a good starting point, and I'm looking forward to seeing where the Niners go next. And best believe we will keep you updated on all of that. But for now, that's all that we have for this video on Niners Digest. Thank you again, as always, for watching. My name is Ethan Galbraith, and we will see you in the next video.